what's up, dog?
What's up, dog? What?
I don't know. My dog just started barking, so.
Oh.
Outside, nice day. She's out barking.
You feel like you'd go a little old school with the what's up, dog?
Yeah, I think I am going to go a little old school.
Okay, that's fine. Nothing wrong with that. Just caught me a little off guard.
Yeah.
Are you guys still basking in the glory of global warming in Nashville?
Yeah, it's pretty warm.
Here too.
It's nice. It's not hot, but it's getting there. It's all right. Yeah, I'm pretty excited about it, actually. I've been driving around, so you know how you're in the car and it's hot, and it's like rushing through the endless traffic demands of this ridiculously growing city.
Man, no kidding.
3,000 people a month are moving here, and I just met all of them.
What? Probably where, like on I-40 or something, or all stuck in traffic?
Yeah. The I-40, Murfreesboro, Lafayette corridor, which is now just like everything's getting sold. All those old crappy buildings are now going to be high-rises or something. Who knows?
Man, it's only a matter of time before it just reaches its boiling point and people invest a bunch of money in high-rises and nobody fills them.
Yeah, you would think, but...
Yeah, I think I said that like 2 years ago and it hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, and that's when I'll buy another one, maybe. Once this podcast takes off.
There we go. Yep, we'll definitely be able to afford a few condos.
Yeah, I thought of something I want to call one question. Email us if you got a question about this podcast or any other podcast. Email us at crushingiron@gmail.com and put one question in the subject title and just ask a question. We'll get back to you.
Yeah, pretty quick actually. Yeah, most of the time.
Yeah, and then the other thing I thought about was like if you do like the podcast and you're digging what's going on, I'm sure you've got a friend out there that you could turn on to the Crushing Iron scene, and that might help us out too. Just a little word of mouth spread to your friends.
Oh yeah,
that seems like it's happening.
Sure. Yeah, I think it's happening pretty good. And actually, if you if you can make it through the end of this podcast, I'm going to have a little goodie. Something. Yeah, a little goodie for the listeners. For those who either A, have given a review already, or B, end up giving a review here before the end of the month. I'm gonna have a little goodie for those folks, and I'll give the full details of that at the end of today's podcast.
Oh, that sounds great. And what also, I am calculating or constructing my plan to do a sort of hybrid coaching offer as well. So if you got questions about that, drop me a line, crushingiron@gmail. We're figuring that out, right?
We are. Yep.
Okay,
taking
good.
care of it as we speak. Yep.
Good, yeah. Sort of a subset of your full-on coaching operation.
Yes. You're not really plan B. You're just a different plan.
Yeah, just a different plan, which could be, really nice for some people. All right, so we are going to get into it. I like this topic because it resonates with me about every race, like hardcore, It
resonates with you year-round.
Year-round.
Yeah, you're perpetually in taper mode. Yeah, today I think it's a topic we haven't really discussed yet, and it's definitely, now that we're getting closer and closer to race season, and whether it's just running races or getting your first triathlon out of the way here in the next few weeks or months, tapering is definitely kind of one of the bigger mysteries, I would say, in endurance sports and even just sports in general. And it looks totally different for almost each individual. And more oftentimes, the biggest mistake people make is that their definition of taper is rest. And that is not the case.
Right. My thing has always been sort of, by feel in general. And I know that I think you've gone through a couple cycles of this, and I'm curious to hear where you've kind of come out scientifically. Is this where you're going to go, science?
I'm going to go a little bit of science, and then a little bit of personal experience, and then kind of the variations of tapering between distances and also training load, because there's a huge difference in training load, distance, and how long you've been training at a specific level when it comes down to taper. There is no taper out there that fits every person,
right?
Whether it's sprint, Olympic, 70.3, or Ironman, regardless of age, regardless of sex, regardless of work life. And then the other big aspect that we'll touch on here in a little bit is just overall training volume and how long you've been doing that for. That also dictates a person who, can kind of allow themselves a longer taper because they have some really, really deep fitness, or B, the person who is maybe lacking a little bit of fitness and doesn't really have the time to lose. And really is at the point where they just need to stay sharp and ready and not just get slow and stagnant. So I'll go ahead and dive in unless you have any questions off the bat for me to get going.
Yeah, no, let's just dive in. Are you going to start with distances or just general theory?
With general theory, yeah. So you'll read a lot of what most people call percentage-based tapering, and that is basically just a reduction in overall load. And so that's a basic reduction in overall volume. So if you're averaging, or your peak week has a volume of, let's say, like, I'll make it easy and has like 20 hours. Okay. Well, if you're doing maybe a 3-week taper, your next week would be 75% of your usual volume. The next week, your second week of taper would be 50% of your total average weekly volume, and then that final week of taper will be 25%. So it's you're taking a huge chunk out of your total volume and slowly bringing it down to race day. Now, a 3-week taper would be something that somebody might use for an Ironman. I think I see a lot of people doing that. I think it's a horrible idea. Most pros, even, or top end age groupers, you won't see doing like a 3-week, like really aggressive taper. And those are people who have really, really, really deep fitness. For the average Joe who's training, working, has a family, kids, whatever, 2 weeks, for me, 10 days to 2 weeks is plenty. Because you don't have that much in your tank for a reserve.
Quick question.
But yeah.
The volume, 75, 50, 25%, does that apply to the intensity too?
No. Okay. I'll get to that here in a little bit. But the volume is something you should reduce. Intensity, and then that's often reduced, but often people reduce intensity as well, which is what leaves people with that all too common, I just feel flat, or I had dead legs. Sprint distance races, honestly, I would suggest maybe like a 1 to 2, 3-day taper max, with not much reduction in volume, just a little bit less intensity, but keeping it there, because obviously, sprint and Olympic distance, Olympic distance taper maybe a week. But again, those two races can be looked at totally different for the same athlete. If you're athlete A, who is doing their very, very first Olympic distance triathlon, you're not necessarily going to go all out full speed, like 90 to 95% all out effort the whole time, because you don't have that kind of fitness. You're more looking to complete it than you are to really compete and dig really deep.
Right.
So a person like that, they might have a little bit longer of a taper because they're A, going to be out there a little bit longer, and B, they need that extra reserve. Whereas a person B might be looking to win it. And if that's the case, then he or she's looking to stay really, really sharp, keep the speed, and has you're probably looking at a 3 to 4, maybe like I said, a week max for a taper.
Okay.
But the biggest thing is you need to keep those fast legs. So you'll see most people will continue to give a lot of, especially in the bike and the run, will continue to keep their efforts. They'll be shorter, but they'll still be as intense.
Okay. Yeah.
Once you move up from that 70.3, you can see anything from a 7, 10 to 14 day. So once we get into the longer distance stuff, I'll kind of go a little bit scientific. And this is something that, excuse me, that most 70.3 and Ironman race participants really struggle with is they get to a point and, they just basically choose to rest. Tons of days off. You get totally out of the consistency of training. And there's a term that Steve Magnus uses that we'll have a guest on next month, and it's kind of called muscle tension. And the way he describes it is, there's muscle tension, and that is the resting tension you have in your muscle fibers. The higher that tension, the better the spring. Does that make sense? So when for example, when we went back and talked about fraud or for real, we talked about stretching. We talked about those athletes at the beginning of a 5K race doing the long hamstring toe touches and really trying to elongate those ligaments and those tendons and those muscles, when in fact what they're about to do is constrict them. Constrict real tight and release, and that's what gets that fast turnover. Well, that's where muscle tension comes in. That's also used a term for cycling. Is the tighter that tension, the tighter you have something wound up, once it's let loose, the bigger the explosion, the bigger the release, the farther it'll go.
That makes sense.
The same can be said for your muscles. And so what a lot of people do is they just rest so much that it really with just so much slow running or slow cycling, what it does is it really brings you to a point where you've lost too much muscle tension. And you can feel flat, you can have just dead legs, and it might be to where you just feel like I just haven't, you don't get your legs until you're 5 miles done with the race.
Okay.
And so that a lot of people will do that. And so there's a lot of ways to structure a training week, obviously, especially for a taper. But a couple standard rules is you reduce the volume but keep the intensity. For reasons we just discussed. The intensity you want to keep because you want to keep the muscle fibers activated and ready and willing to work the day you need them. Number 2 is when in doubt, do less.
Okay.
If you're going, I know you're a huge fan of that. You're that's like your motto in life. So you've got, so if you're on the schedule for on a Monday before a race and you're racing on Sunday and you go out and you're just super stressed, and it calls for 45 minutes with some strides in the middle, and you're not feeling it, keep the strides, cut it to 20 minutes. The priceless commodity of training week is sleep. Prop your feet
week?
up. Yeah, taper week. Well, always. But sleeping in, if you have to choose between sleeping in an extra hour and a half or 2 hours or getting in a short workout, choose to sleep in. I mean, it's a no-brainer. And that's and then the day and 2 before the race, get off your feet. As much as everybody loves a good expo, except for me, get off your feet and go prop them up, and Netflix is your best friend. People do so much walking and so much busy work is what I call it around races when they just don't kind of understand the toll that it does take on your body. And so, minimize your athlete pickup experience and get your legs up in the bed, on the couch, whatever it is, and make sure that you're resting.
That is a troublesome thing because you kind of have that energy going and you want to burn it off and walk around and see what's going on, meet some new people. But so you're telling me the hotel room is where you need to be?
You need to be in the hotel room. For me in the past when I've gone,
or the lobby.
Or the lobby. Yeah, hotel lobby is actually a pretty nice place to hang out. For me, I've tried both in the past. I've tried the long taper and I've tried the short taper. For me, the longer taper really, really affects my running poorly. I can't seem to keep my turnover. I feel like it helps my cycling a little bit more, but for example, for me in Wisconsin, I didn't really have the benefit and the luxury of like a really, really long taper for what I wanted to accomplish, for what I wanted to like time wise. I just didn't have that. All right, just take 3 weeks and let's just kind of slowly, ease it back in. I was actually fairly aggressive with how long I stayed kind of in my training because I lost a lot of time. I lost a lot of time at the end of June and the beginning, mid-July when Hayden was born, when he was in the NICU. And we moved right before that. I just lost a lot of time. And so it was, how am I going to do with building my base? And for me, the week before Wisconsin, I still had a 14-hour training week. I ran, I think 14. Yeah. So I ran 14 and a half miles so a week and a half before Wisconsin, I ran like almost 15 miles. I did an easy 2-hour run, on that Wednesday, and that Sunday. So 4 days before that, I ran 19. So
wow.
Yeah, and so like 3 weeks out, I had still 2 wex out rather. I did one of my longer training weeks of the whole year, and I did, it looks like almost 18 hours. I did a 4-hour ride, and then the next day I did actually a 2.5-hour run with a swim, and that was one of my biggest weeks of the year, and that was 14 days out from Wisconsin. But for me, the point was to I wasn't going to gain a lot of fitness, but my fitness wasn't as deep as it needed to be, so I had to do more work to keep it there.
Yeah.
If I had actually too much, I actually would have lost some fitness because it wasn't that deep and came in sluggish. Another thing I do for me is I'd always take 2 days off during race week. So it's obviously your taper week. I take 2 days off. My athletes, when I first start working with them, absolutely drives them bonkers that I don't give them the day off before a race. The first time they do it, they're like, why am I not taking the day off? Why am I not taking the day off? I'm like, you take the day off on the Friday, and then Saturday we're going to hopefully do all 3.
Really?
Yeah, it's not a race rehearsal. It's not a time to nail your nutrition. It's a reminder time. Get in the water, get to feel on with your swim, look at the course, make sure everything feels good. Swimming is one of the biggest failures in tapering. Most triathletes flat out suck at swimming, unless you've listened to our 2 previous podcasts,
right?
And give up and really cut back on the swimming. Swimming is one of those sports where feel for the water is vital. It's so important. And if you scale down from like 3 or 4 swims a week to 2 and then to 1 to race week, if you're not an experienced swimmer, you lost all feel for the water because you just don't have it built up. You just don't have that natural feel to begin with. So when you taper so much swim wise, you lose it all. And then you get in the water and you feel like crap.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, that's back to my my theory on swimming and why I feel like when I swim a lot in general, I don't always swim like super far, but the more I swim, the more I just feel like I'm a better swimmer. And it obviously has a lot to do with feel of the water. And you're right, isn't it true that you should maybe, if anything gets a bump that week, it's swimming? Is that not true? Maybe not a bump, but like can stay more frequent and you don't have to worry about it quite as much, overdoing it.
Yeah. I mean, I love to see my athletes get in at least 3 swims, which is most people's standard kind of swim week. Getting closer and even the Monday before will be a pretty hard set because you can recover.
Yeah.
Swimming is one of those things, and it'll be pull buoy heavy because but it's to keep that feel, to keep that arm turnover. And like I said, most people just don't have enough deep swim fitness, even if they have other deep fitness, that they'll just lose it in a minute. And so that's something that people don't think about. And then I like people to get on. I like to get the feel of waking your body up, because it has been kind of such a dormant place that getting out the day before helps me. And this is why I suggest it to my athletes, is just shake everything out.
Yeah.
Get out the cobwebs, get a good feel for it. And honestly, it gives you a chance to kind of soak in the environment and the excitement, and make yourself do it slow. I say if you're going to go for a ride the day before, which I always suggest, right before you check it in, make sure your gears work, make sure the shifting's good, make sure your tires are good, and then rack it. I know we did that this last year at Wisconsin. We rode probably close to 40 minutes. And I think I'm looking at now, we rode for 30 minutes, and the riding in transition. It was a cool, easy ride. I mean, those are your coffee rides where you should feel like you can always drink a cup of coffee while you're riding. Nothing hard, no efforts, just kind of working the legs out, loosening them up, and getting ready to go. And then for the run, absolutely zero efforts, but just to kind of wake up those muscles and say, hey, remember this? Remember what we've been working so hard for and all the training you've done? Well, I don't want you to be one more day off. You're going to be too dormant. You're going to forget what we're going to do. So I always suggest trying to get in at least all 3 the day before the race and taking Friday as my day off.
How far did we run that day? It was a mile?
No, it's more than that. I'd probably
miles?
say, probably 2 miles. So we rode 30. It was just generally what I have people do is a 10 to 15 minute swim with no efforts, 35 to 40 minute bike, and then 10-minute super easy run off the bike with no efforts. And that's pretty much it. But run wise, I ran 3 times that week, but I don't run anything over 20 minutes. I was in a huge, and that's the other thing, is don't change up your frequency and consistency. Keep that literally the exact same. That's another, besides those critical days off, you see a lot of people that run 6 days a week chop it down to running twice. Your body's not used to that. Continue with the frequency and consistency, reduction in volume. And I think I remember you looking at me crazy because I ran every day that week except for like Friday on the treadmill inside the hotel. But up until that point, I had been running 5 or 6 days a week, and so not running. I mean, the week before Wisconsin, I ran 40 miles. I mean, and I ran 6 days. And so I was used to it. And so there's only so much you can get out of your body from a habit standpoint to where you're starting to create a new habit. And when you do it for too long, you've now created a negative habit that's going to affect you again negatively on race day.
I think it's just synonymous with the word taper is rest, and I just feel like people they're training their whole time, and then they train to that last big week or whatever, and then the next day in the calendar says taper, and then automatically everybody just kind of throws the rest of the ride away until the race day. But the taper obviously is very strategic.
Yeah, I mean it's the most strategic part, and that's kind of an art. And I think that it's hard to I always defer to my athletes when I prescribe them a taper that may be longer or shorter depending on for example, like we talked about before, I've got athlete Joe who has been averaging 20 hours a week for the last 6 to 8 months. Well, he's got so much deep fitness, but he's also got much deeper fatigue. Mm-hmm. So he's going to need a longer taper than athlete Joe, or Jenny or whatever, who only has been averaging 14 hours a week and for the past 6 months. Well, your taper in your last month block is going to look ridiculously different. and that was the case with me. Is I was doing 12s and 13s and 14s, and then a month out, weeks 3 and 4 out for me were my biggest weeks. They were both 20-hour weeks. I did a 100-mile ride and then a 20-mile run the next day. Those are my biggest weeks. I just didn't have that time, and that's why I didn't reduce. I didn't reduce my intensity as well. Like my huge ride the Sunday before. I did 4 threshold efforts that were 15 minutes long. Mm-hmm. So I definitely wasn't giving up the intensity. I was reducing the volume but keeping the intensity. It was one of my better rides of the year, actually. And so that's when I kind of knew I was kind of in the right place, kind of the right ballpark, because I was starting to. Honestly, I may have peaked a little too early. Because I didn't think I had it in me. I didn't think I had it. I just jumped up so quick from doing, short rides to jumping into 4 and 5 hour rides to play catch up and felt great. I still raced well. I'm really happy with my performance, but again, it's an art that I think if you're listening, you should always be willing to change. And sometimes willing to take a risk. I always tell people that don't use the term training through a race. Just don't use it. For a couple of reasons. One is just flat out excuse if you suck. Most importantly, racing is important. And you should never take, in my opinion, racing lightly if you're choosing to actually race. So respect it, taper, and it's more of a mindset thing. I'm in a mindset that I'm going to do well, and I'm going to really do well at this race. Well, if you come into it saying, I'm just going to train through this race, you've already kind of put yourself behind the 8 ball, in my opinion. Because you're giving yourself an excuse for at mile 30 or 40 of the bike and you're not feeling it to just pack it in. And say, I'm just training through this race. It's my B race. It's still a race.
Yeah.
And what you can do during those, what I would suggest, however, is during those races that are less of a priority, is play around with your taper strategy. Maybe try a shorter one and see how your body responds. Some people respond differently over a long taper. Some people respond differently over a short taper. You're never going to know how well you can race until you've tried both. And so I would definitely recommend treating some of your earlier season races that may not be of the top priority and try out a shorter taper. And see what that looks like and see what happens on race day and try to race well. If it doesn't work out, try a longer one. See if that doesn't work, then, it's always something you should work with. There's no, here's what your taper week should look like, because everybody's life is different. Everybody's training's different. Everybody's at a different place in their athlete life cycle. It's just, there's so many variables to take into a taper to where you can actually peak for your perfect day than you can ever get out of a magazine article.
I was just trying to think back to last year for me, and your point about kind of feeling like you're a little behind, so you stretched or you pushed into that taper period a little bit harder, and that's sort of what I was doing last year. Of course, I always sort of do that, but as I was going into my half, which was what did we decide? That was about a month away from the race. And
yeah, that's 6 weeks. Yeah,
6 weeks away, and I did what you were saying. I kind of trained through it in a way, but I did also taper it. That's a really interesting point you bring up, I think, because I pushed my taper week or week and a half harder than I normally would, and I found out that A, I wasn't quite ready for that race, and B, that I think I might have pushed a little bit too hard on some levels, because I got off the bike and my run was not there, and I don't really think it had a lot to do with over training during the taper, but just I wasn't quite in shape yet. So I used it as a training race, but I didn't throw it away. I was kind of using it as an experimental zone, and I thought I could do well, but didn't. And I came back out of that race quick and started hitting the deeper, harder, more volume stuff right out of that race, and I just use it kind of as a springboard in a way. So, but I hear what you're saying. I think that's a killer idea to kind of, if it's not your A race, don't throw it away as kind of a trainer, but just screw around with the way that you might taper and see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, because like again, like there's most people get theirs out of a book or out of whatever, and or a magazine or whatever, and it's not for you, and play around with it, find what works. A lot of times I have in the past, I've actually played around with it in terms of like a recovery week for me. So if I've had like 2 or 3 really, really big, build weeks where I've done like up the volume and intensity a lot, and I'm due for a recovery week, well, what I'll usually try is like, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, I'll go fairly easy. Take a day off, everything's short, frequency is still there. And then Friday or Saturday, I'll actually go out for a pretty substantial hard run or a really, really hard long ride and see how I feel. And that's as close as I like to get to kind of replicating a taper during like the actual season instead of actually taking one, because you don't want to take too much recovery time during the season. You're just losing time for gained fitness. But that's a good way to do it, is to kind of play with your recovery week and say, all right, I can take Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, super easy. Let's see what I've got in the tank on the weekend. Because if I can perform really, really, really well on back-to-back days, well, I'm still carrying a lot of fatigue. And that's something that you can get to just if you dive into it, if you use Training Peaks and you use the performance management chart, for the geeks out there, kind of like me, that there are specific factors in what they call form. So if you use Training Peaks, whether it's on your app or on your laptop desktop version, on your performance management chart, and probably even on your app, when you scroll through your feed, you're going to see in pink an ATL, which represents your acute training load, which is what they call your overall fatigue. They're going to have in blue 3 letters called CTL, which is your chronic training load, which in short would be considered just kind of your overall fitness. And then they're going to have in yellow, they're going to have TSB, which is your training stress balance. And that's, in short, is your form. What kind of form are you in? A really, really negative form means that you have you've trained a lot. You have a very, very high acute training load versus your chronic training load. So let's say that you have some deep fitness, but your acute training load has been so much that it puts you in the negative. It's real easy. Negative TSB means you're pretty much toast. And getting closer to baseline 0 or positive like plus 10, plus 20 is when you begin to freshen up. And so there are a lot of theories out there about certain distances and what's required from a positive or negative standpoint to race well. Generally speaking, a form of like plus 5 to plus 10 to 15 is where you want to be for a 70.3 for an A race to race really, really well. And then for an Ironman, it's around 15 to 20 plus. But again, you can read a lot of research and articles. Some people, and that's the great thing about this performance management chart and Training Peaks, if you use it. And when I say if you use it, that also means if you also update your training zones and your power and keep track of everything, you can look over at your peaks and at your valleys and at your high numbers and your low numbers and find out what form you race best in. And if you don't keep track of that data, then you can't, because you might see like one workout you just crush and you're like, man, I had it. Because some athletes, honestly, they race better with kind of a slightly negative to just barely slightly positive form. So they still have a little bit of fatigue. They haven't shed it all. That's just how they work. They fire better on all cylinders when they're still a little warm and they're still a little, I wouldn't say fatigued. I would just say carrying a little bit more versus, their car runs better when they get it out of the garage after it's been sitting for only an hour versus you might do better if your car has been sitting in the garage for a day or two and then you get out and burn it. That's probably the best analogy I can give for that analytical side.
Yeah, that analytical. Obviously, I don't use that, so I go by this.
Obviously,
major feel guys. But as you're saying, in the taper, there's this thing where, if I know what kind of a ride, for example, it's gonna give me some good stuff, but it's not gonna make me sore the next day, or it's not gonna wear me out. When I'm in good shape, maybe that, for example, maybe that's just a hour and a half ride with some explosion sections and things like that. When I get done, I just feel great. So it's like there's no reason something like that can't be part of my taper to me. And for some other people that have a deeper base, like you're talking about, that may be 2 hours or whatever. But
exactly. You're exactly right.
Same for running, because I know at certain points during the season what type of run and how far is not going to make me get out of bed the next morning kind of with a little limp or something like that. But that may be a 5 or 6 mile run, and for other people that might be 10, just depending on what kind of shape you're in. And that's why
exactly
as I build, and that's sort of, I've always kind of pushed that envelope with the swim a little bit. I usually start peaking in my swim right around taper, so I don't back down on that. And a lot of it's because of my intimidation by the swim, and I just kind of, go as hard as I can, as far, not necessarily hard or sprinting, but with building in the swim.
Yeah, I mean, I'll generally, like, from a peak standpoint for swimming, in their like peak phase is you're going to get in 4 swims a week, and then the 2 weeks of peak, the 2 weeks of taper, I'll move them down to 3. But you're more than likely going to be getting in the same amount of volume. They're just spread out with more rest, and they're just more quality versus an extra run with more quantity. Again, because swimming is just one of those things that you can lose feel for, really quickly, as well as the other ones. But taper is a super complicated thing. It's that's often oversimplified into just rest. But the book that I last read, the Jim Vance one about just all data, it was just like a total breakdown of using that performance management chart and finding out what form you need, and more importantly, plotting a course to how you get there, to where you won't just kind of accidentally stumble upon it. You can plan it out months in advance. If you have any questions on that, because it can be tedious, that's one of those things I'd love to hear from our listeners, email, and I'd be happy to kind of go over that and the performance management chart. And honestly, like, just what some of that stuff means. It is a great tool, and it's free. I use it and integrate it with my workouts for all my athletes, so I can see everything. And it's not just a training diary. It does have a lot of useful applications that can really, really help you planning wise and stress wise. And honestly, a lot of people, from an injury standpoint, if you started getting to like -20 to -25 form, TSB, you're flirting with injury because you're so overtrained. It's time to rest. And so there's so many good applications. Again, if you have any questions or just kind of need a general walkthrough, that's something I'd be happy to do as well.
Yeah, I'll be definitely emailing you with some questions about that.
Dude, you already used up your text. You already used up your tech support call earlier this week or yesterday. Yeah, you used that one up already.
Oh man, that's a good thing we do. Let's up the podcasts one more a week. That way, I can ask you some more questions.
Yeah, I just won't ever get actually published. Yeah. Did you get that fixed, or did it make sense?
What, the watch?
Yeah.
I figured out some things with it. I actually went over to the run store here in town because I said, well, I'm at this coffee shop right across the street from the run store, and I'm trying to figure out this run watch that's deeper than my knowledge on this sort of thing. I just walked over there and I said, hey, somebody show me how to use this. And, of course, nobody knew how to do it. So
yeah.
I don't know.
I'm sorry, man.
It's okay.
You'll make it. Yeah, first world problem, huh?
It really is.
I know it is.
Super first world problem.
Yeah, I know it is. More than people know.
Yeah.
So for all of you who have stuck around for this podcast on tapering, what I've done here over the last few days, as we have created a crushing iron store, training plan store in Training Peaks. I'll get Mike to put that link in the show notes where we have our own crushing iron page with available training plans. And so what I'd like to do, A, is a little bit of appreciation for those of you who have already left reviews, and B, hopefully encourage some additional reviews, is that if you've already left a review, or when you do, before the end of the month, so next week, email us at crushingiron@gmail.com with your review, either past or the one you just did, and we will send you a coupon discount code for you only, and you can go onto that site and purchase any one of the training plans that we offer there for 30% off.
Whoa.
So, yeah, pretty generous offer. I spent a lot of time on these training plans, and they're all 16 to 20 weeks long. But a little thank you to those of you out there listening that have given us some awesome reviews and started with us at the beginning. And it's the least I could do. We'll get you a Crushing Iron T-shirt, and I think it's another way that we can. People always say that you want to really create a community, which I think is garbage. I think you can become a community, and you can't create one. And if you do, it's not the way it should be. And so this is my effort and goal, is to allowing our kind of Crushing Iron to kind of become a community, and do things to to help other people who are listening and with their training, and It's my gift to you.
Well, that's a really nice gift, man.
But I swear to God, if you give us a 1-star review and use that code, I'm coming after you.
What kind? Just quickly, you said 16 and 20 weeks.
Yeah, I've got 4 up there right now. I'll have another one up there by tomorrow morning. I've got an Ironman 20-week plan. I've got a 70.3 16-week plan. And then you don't see a lot of coaches do this. I actually have 2 just straight swim plans in there. I get a lot of emails and text messages from people that want just kind of like a laminated, swim book they can take and just use the swim workouts. And this isn't specifically what this is, but within each 16 and 20 week plan, you're going to get like 35 to 40 specific unique swim workouts. But from a swim standpoint, it's from, point A to point Z to have you peak for either your 70.3 or your Ironman race. If you don't see a training plan in the store that you want and want to use that code, email us back and I'll get one created for you and get that over.
Wow, that's awesome, man. I'm excited about that.
Yeah, I really enjoy doing it. It's kind of like creating training plans is really kind of like, it's kind of art, in my opinion. You're the artist and you're really, really up close, and you kind of might be doing like just a little dot here and a little dot there. And if you're really, really up close, you can't see exactly what it is. But when you take 10 steps back, you can see this, what you've created on this really nice canvas, which is hopefully a really great performance. So I enjoyed doing it, and I hope that, I know the athletes that I have enjoy it. So hopefully we can, be able to reach a few more people out there to enjoy some of my artwork.
Cool. So, yeah, there's a lot of reasons to email crushingiron@gmail.com. One question, email us with your iTunes reviews if you want a discount on the race training plans, and just say, hey, what's up, and build the community. No, not build the community. Embrace it. What are we doing? We're becoming a community. All right, that's cool. Anything else, brother? Dog?
I'm officially bikeless.
Oh, that's right. Man, you're cleaning house.
I am cleaning house.
You're focused on the mountain.
I'm focused on the mountain. As of right now, I'm all in.
Okay.
One focus, not dabbling.
Leadville it is.
Yeah, next week I'll give another Leadville update. Lots been going on, so I'll give a good little Leadville update with my training for next week.
And maybe I'll give a Chat 70.3 update.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, that sounds good. Hopefully
man.
I'll have some to update next week.
Yeah, not just another week of taper.
Taper on, people.
Taper on. See you, man.
All right, see you.